Hey, hello and welcome back. I'm Philip and I want to talk about this incredible boring topic, bubble diagrams. Or is it boring? Well, if you run an architecture practice or a master planning firm or a design studio, do you think bubble diagrams or conceptual diagrams, flowcharts are useful in your design process? Or do you think they're just a fancy way to show off in front of a client? Or do you think they are a curse which restrict your creative freedom? Well, let's find out. So here's my problem. I started this course, the Ultimate Ladybug course, and it should be an Ultimate Ladybug course, of course. But I'm stuck and I was procrastinating really a long time now on how I could move forward. So we analyzed the space. We got weather data from the space. We found weather data. We found the space, the actual site where it is, because it's very remote. And now we were starting with one of the first tools to actually analyze the sunlight, the direct sun hours, the relationship between buildings and the site. My problem is I don't have a design. I just randomly placed some massing on a site. And actually, one of the reasons why I started this course was that I want to show a real project. See this video as a spin-off video to my Ultimate Ladybug course, and I need this to move forward in the main course. And we will see if bubble diagrams can help us to actually understand our space better and to make informed decisions. Alright, so you might remember that we looked into Grasshopper, and if you don't, it doesn't matter. If you've never seen any of my videos, also doesn't matter. In fact, this is the real start where we start to design a space. The project is in Rwanda and the brief is a farm. It's gonna be a women-owned farm. Because of the size of the space, the brief says 4 individuals, 4 women will run this space. And of course, because it's a farm, there will be times where there are other people help on the farm. The space, the farm is in Rwanda, as I said, and this is the site. It's somewhere in Kikomero, and this is the site. And in one of the last videos, we looked at a very simple massing layout just to test our tool, a sun hour tool, which you can also find in the show notes, the link to that video. Very quickly how that looks like. So we did something like this. We tested the sun hours, the direct sun hours based on this massing on the site. Now, the problem is we actually don't have really a design. And I was hinting in that same video about the brief. I will go back here into Rhino and I did a flat version of this master plan so we can understand everything a bit better. And I was talking about the brief. And the brief says that there needs to be a certain amount of square meter used for certain things, like for example, livestock, household garden. And then I was thinking of what else do we need? And I tried to come up with some initial square meters for different areas. Living, indoor, sleeping rooms, equipment, toilets, kitchen. So there are indoor areas and outdoor areas. And it's kind of a start of like an area or bubble diagram, but it's not very fluent. It's actually hard to maneuver, I would say. Let's see. Let's look at this. So this is the master plan, and yeah, I tried to organize a bit this. But let's dive into that whole thing a bit more. And what I like to use in that case is Photoshop. So I have this pad, but you have this pad here. It's a very simple pad, costs, I don't know, 60 pounds, $70, 70 euros, something like that. Not really expensive. It has a stylus without battery. I liked it better, but I need a cable to connect to my PC or laptop. But I use it all the time. I use it to sketch. And well, let's jump into Photoshop and I can explain a bit more of how we could look at the space. And we need to look at a space in different ways in order to come up with some answers. By the way, a good way to bring your screen into Photoshop, because we don't need to have a super high res image, but we can make it high res anyway, is I use here underscore screen capture to clipboard or to file. I use clipboard a lot. Sorry, not screen. There are 2 ways. There's one is called screens capture to clipboard, and that actually only takes your screen, and now you can copy it into Photoshop or any other drawing program. The other one is viewport capture to clipboard. And this is better for me because it gives me a dialog where I can dial in a certain size. And I want to use a resolution, which I want, the 16:9 resolution, HD. Ratio. But I want to use a higher scale, a higher resolution, so I can actually dial in here twice. That gives me a good size to sketch over. And in that case, I don't need transparent, so I would just have a white background. And now I can say okay. I go into Photoshop, say new, and it says here clipboard. Okay, great. Now I put this in, and then I have exactly that size, the screen, but in a higher resolution. So I can actually go quite close. If that is not enough for you, of course you can dial in even higher res. And I might do that because actually I want to have this a bit larger in my, I want to have a better resolution for the entire master plan. View with the clipboard, okay, and 3 times 5,000 pixels, I think almost 6,000 pixels. I think that's more than enough. Also depends on the power of your computer, by the way. So the larger it is, but yeah, I think that's a quite good resolution. Now I will make another layer here on top, and for sure my face is now exactly here. I make myself smaller. You don't need to see me really. Or maybe I put myself, nah. Okay, I made another layer here on top, and normally what I do in order to not being too distracted from what's in here, of all the information, I'm gonna add another layer and make it white, fill with white color. Well, there's probably a more elegant way to do it. And then I can dial in here a certain opacity depending on how much I want to see from the background. And I have the rough areas or the items which we need: livestock, household garden, and so on. It's all in there. But in this case, it's just gonna be we can dial in the exact square meters later on. As we can see, we actually have a lot of space for other things yet still. So there is some areas we need to find a space for it, but the reality is that we have much more space. And the good thing is I can always turn off and on the white, and we can start with simple diagrams or thinking about things. So actually what this whole diagrams, or what are these diagrams for? Or bubble diagrams, flowcharts, actually they are just a matter of thinking about the space. And I mean, you can probably already smell that I believe these diagrams are incredibly useful to design a space. So you will never have the same kind of direct connection between your brain and your pen doing this. You're thinking directly on drawing it on a paper or on a computer with pad, doesn't really matter. Using a 3D modeling program, if you cannot translate your thoughts that quickly, it's better you draw it with the hand. And then we can always go back into a 3D modeling program. All right. What I missed in my plan, and which you should have normally, and just make another layer here. North would be always quite useful. Just draw it in. It doesn't really matter. And the other thing is a scale bar. In that case, I know that the rough distance from this space here is about 10 meters. So that's enough information for me at the moment. So I can say, okay, that's roughly that is 10 meters. It gives me a good understanding. So the first thing we can look at is the arrival or the main axis. Maybe take another color. We're just sketching really. Don't worry about, this is not about artwork. It's not about creating artworks. It's about thinking. There is a road here, and I would not say it's a main road, but it's the adjacent road to the side. That's where all the access will happen. There's another road here, but there's not really an access. And it's also not, so there's another plot here probably, which doesn't belong to this one. But maybe there could be an access here. So, or here, I don't know. The other thing about access is the topography. We have, if this is 10 meters and we have a drop, these contour lines indicate a 1 meter rise. So that means it's a 1 to 10 slope, 1 to 10 slope at the beginning, and then it becomes steeper. The more further down, the steeper it becomes. It's quite steep actually. It's a quite steep slope. It's just something to keep in mind, because if there is an access road, if we need an access road here, we need to probably think about, is it better on that side or this side. I'll go back. Now this was a very ugly plan. Can make another one. I will keep it. I will not throw it away. I can actually make a group and say, and put things in here just to keep all the thinking happening on the plan. We don't want to throw it away. We can have a look later on, or we want to have a look later on. We want to be able to go back and see different options. But yeah, axis, it's going to be from here and maybe from here and maybe from here. I don't know. Or maybe I can, if there's another property, the best chance is probably on the side of the property, and maybe we can access this here. In the plan, we can actually see that there is a sort of like a flat space or like a turnaround area, probably like a parking area or something like that. So that's actually quite a good indication that, you know, you want to have some flat area to park or to stop. That's a good thing. There will be the need for a connection from here to here. And the reason is, and it maybe not, maybe it's just a dirt road or a path, something where you can go with a tractor maybe. It needs to be a free space. It could be very neat along the side, also possible, but probably not. Probably want to have some buffer. The reason is, if we have farm production crops in these areas, then they will be harvested here. They go out here and then they come up that way. And you might need a storage. Actually, we haven't really thought about storage. Something we missed, a storage. Or at least an area where you can put your harvest. And maybe that probably needs to be somewhere where you can transport it to somewhere else, to a market or... So it's almost like a flowchart diagram exercise. Gonna throw this away again. So if we have farming here, we have a harvesting going on, and then we want to transport it up, and maybe there's a storage or like an area where you can do further processing to your harvest, and then you can transport it wherever you need to. So that means we need some area where we can, first of all, temporary store stuff or place stuff we harvest, a place where a truck can fit and pick up stuff. Then we need, so this is probably one way to think about it. And maybe because we have another road here, I don't know the quality of that road, but maybe there's another road here which we could use in order to get things, maybe temporary store stuff here and get it here. Possible, maybe. So this is one option. It's another option, or it's a combination of both. It's also good that we have our production here, because if you look at the north and the equator is on that side, so sunlight will be most of the time the sunlight will come from this side and not from that side. So we have more sun coming from that side, from the north actually, than from the south. That means the lower side is actually also good for a buffer planting, for example. Actually, both sides are. But this has something to do with the wind as well. But we also have wind coming from that side. So you already understand there's loads of things we can think about without using any parametric tool. So, okay, I'm gonna, instead of like throwing this away, I would just make the opacity a bit less. And now I draw again. A new layer. 10 meter, a 10 meter track. Let's say I need at least 20 meters, a space where I can load stuff. So let's say this is my loading area. I need another space for my temporary, a space for to place my temporary harvest. And then I need a path going down. The width of the path needs to be probably around 4 meters, and maybe there's a connection here. Just very quick diagram, just to get an understanding of the space. Now we'll just get rid of the color. We can keep that. We can keep this, but we make it again. We make it very light. And now we can think of a different aspect. We need to think about a different aspect. And this is about, again, it has something to do with the production. but it's a different flow chart. It's thinking about, and by the way, you can make up your own rules on how you want to play this. The more angles you can take to look at a project, the better. So for example, I could say there's a public area. There is an interface between the public area and the private area. And then we could say, this is my private area. I have an area which is semi-private. It's production, but it's used to serve the people who live here. And then I have a production, and maybe this overlaps a bit. This is my farmland, and maybe this is, you might call it also farmland because it's part of that. Maybe there are bees, and maybe there are trees which you can harvest fruits and so on. But there's a very clear flow of things. So harvesting, processing, and then getting it out to the market, or even maybe within that public space, or let's say privately owned public space. We could have even an area where we might want to sell directly on site. But there's this like almost like thresholds between the different areas. So it all goes from here to here to here to here. And now we can rearrange this, of course. We can rearrange however we want. Actually, this is exactly how a lot of communities all around the globe actually organize their farm, their land. I can give you an example, or I can the best way is probably to give you an example. What you can see here is a village somewhere in Austria. Although this is not just farmland, it's also residential buildings, but it has still the old kind of structure of how farmland was divided or land was divided. And normally we always have the building in front next to the main road, and then in the back you have your farmland, as you can see it here. And you have a courtyard. This is a very good example, actually. So you have a very tiny interface between the public, and you have your building, and then in the back you have your farmland and storage rooms and so on. Actually, here in the back you have just at the very far end, you have a bit of a forest, then you have crops, then you have storage areas and so on, and then living areas, and then you have your public areas, and maybe even combined with a restaurant, for example. So, and what happened in the past in these areas was that owners who had kids then divided these areas, and they become longer and longer strips. So they were very wide, and because they had to divide it for their kids, so they become smaller strips of land. But it's the same flowchart. You have the things you need the least often is the furthest away from your building, and what you need the most is the closest. And so you have a flow of production, or harvesting, production, processing, and then selling. So that's something you need to think about when you design a farm. Another example, this is in the Philippines. Very similar layout, actually even more so. You have your strips of land, and you can see that probably the property was much larger, the original property, and then it was divided into the kids, and they got one strip, another strip, another strip, and so on. And it's exactly the same kind of flow. You have your farmland in the back, and maybe nowadays some of these buildings, they don't own that land anymore in the back. They maybe gave it to somebody else, but it still shows the structure. So you can really see still how this was organized in the past. So every farmer had his long strip of land in the back, harvesting, processing, and then selling it on the main street. This is it's in Egypt. I mean, very strikingly similar, even more stripy, I would say. Again, you have these very long stripes of plots of land. It makes sense because you want to bring in one crop in one stripe back to your building. It's quite striking how that looks like. I just want to show you a completely different setup, just to make sure that you understand that this is not everywhere the same. So for example, this is just in Mexico somewhere. Here's more typical that you have like these settlements in the middle, and then you have farmland around, and probably it's divided in a completely different way. And it's more, you have your farmland, or you maybe rent farmland And then you have your living areas within that, or you have like maybe even you have much larger farms with much bigger land around you. Of course, that's also possible. So that's what I showed you before. It's not necessarily just the norm, but it's one way, and it's a very typical way for a smaller farm. Just to make sure that you don't think that there's just one way of doing this. Of course not. There are a lot of different ways. But we're talking about a small farm, actually quite a tiny plot. But how can we organize it in the best possible way? Yeah, very quickly what happened, and I will just leave it here really. So that's my first organizational diagram. I have most of the living area and the interface to the public in here. I have my farm, all my farmland here. Or let's make it a bit nicer. The interface to the public is here. The living is here, and the farm is here. It's pretty much what we discussed before. It's going here, from here to here, and from here to here. I'll go a bit deeper so you understand my thinking. First of all, I try to get some inspiration of what's happening. How does this area actually look like? And to be fair, I was shocked by these row houses. They're just really. They're not nice. They're not nice. They are really depressing. So I was looking for, as just an inspiration, I was looking at what traditional buildings in Rwanda, how they looked like. And I came to this, and I was really fascinated by this architecture. It's not about me telling exactly how the architecture should look like, or what is the best way to build these things. But it was an inspiration. It actually helped me to think about, can I give something? Can I use like a traditional thinking of a spatial arrangement as a remembrance of what was in the past? And can I use some similar language in my spatial arrangement? Yes, I know we only talk about bubble diagrams really. So I'm actually quite happy I found this image. So I just placed it here as a reminder. And it has this small little entrance. It has a fence. It has a big square. This is almost, for me, it's like a semi-public space. Then you have an entrance, a threshold where you go into the main building. And then you have another square in the back, it's almost like a temple. Imagine a temple in China. Let's go there. Let's go to a temple in China. It's very similar. You have an entrance space. You have a gate. Then you have a semi-public space. You have the gate to the main space. Maybe here's a bit different where you have the main building in the center or in the end. But it goes from public to semi-public to private. And it feels like, if I look at this, it's very similar. You have a semi-public space, you have the main building, you can access the areas, the spaces behind through other gates, smaller gates. And then you have way more private. It goes from public, semi-public to very private spaces. And I think it should be similar here, going from public to semi-public, where you have very private spaces around here, and then this is the production. Now, thinking a bit more in depth. Okay, first of all, the water. I was thinking water is needed. I don't know exactly where the well will be, but I can imagine if possible, it should be in the center, so you can feed all your crop areas with water. It should be central and should be placed in a way that you can access it from everywhere easily. I was thinking there should be another, if possible, we should harvest water and should just try to get all the runoff water and have storage on the lower end of the site, if possible. Maybe it needs to be bigger, and maybe you have fish in there, or I don't know. And ideally, we should try to harvest water somewhere in the upper areas and have a water tower which serves these buildings here, or the living area plus office and so on. We have the arrival space, which I believe should be an open space. Maybe it could have a nice tree in the middle where people can sit around and can gather. Ideally, you have a small space where you can maybe even sell some of your crops, vegetables, and so on. The space next to it is, for me, it's the interface between the production, the harvesting, and bringing it off-site, bringing it somewhere to a market. This is here. We talked about this before. So this is where a truck can park and get the harvest up, load the harvest on the truck and bring it to a market. Then we have next to it an area where we can temporarily store things, and maybe there's even a building with where we can store our harvest. And then we have next to here, I'm not yet sure, but I'm thinking of, can there be plants which can be used as herbs? Maybe there are also some trees, and they can be next to it. It's part of the gathering space. It could have like fruit trees, for example. Next to it here, we have, after the arrival space, we have a threshold. I call this the welcome space. A threshold where you go from a private space into a semi-public space. Sorry, you go from a public space into a semi-private space. And that's also a gathering space. It's a gathering space mainly for the people who are on site. I have another space here. I call this the office, but the office could be also here. Call this the storage. I'm not sure yet exactly what that space is, but it could be a space. Maybe the office is actually better here, because the office is linked to that transport hub, to the transport place. And then we have this space, which I'm not yet sure what this could be, but it could be toilet, and maybe there's a kind of an access between the public space and semi-public space. Then we have sleeping quarters. Children need to be protected in the background, and they maybe have a space where they can actually have a small outdoor space. We have a kitchen. The kitchen needs to be close to the kitchen garden. The kitchen garden is this one. And by the way, this is a bubble diagram. I'm not talking yet. This is not the actual layout, although I'm very intrigued by the layout. It could be really interesting to go in this kind of language. But we need to be careful, because we have a certain topography which actually crosses like this. So we can talk about it later. We can talk about this in the next session, really. But the kitchen garden needs to be close to the kitchen, of course. So there's a connection between the kitchen garden and the kitchen. And then we have living area, which ideally is also next to the kitchen. So I'm a bit torn where we should have toilets, because toilets are also important. Maybe toilets are somewhere here. I don't know. It's a bit tricky. Ideally, there should be a sequence of smaller gathering spaces. this helps to facilitate crop areas. So the areas where you actually have crops. So you could have crops here that might change every year. You have a different crop here, but again, you have a water, the well in the middle. You have maybe a gathering space near the water. Again, in the middle of crop spaces or areas where you plant your things. Ideally, we have some storage space for equipment, also kind of centralized in the whole area. But I'm not yet happy with this because it's not linked to the path we talked about. We talked about that we should have like a path here, and maybe that's not ideal. Maybe that storage should be actually on that side. Anyway, this is like active thinking, really. And then we have another crop space, and then we have another gathering space, and then another crops, and then maybe this could be combined with beehives if we can have that. And beehives are important because they will help to pollinate all the crops. And last but not least, biogas, and I forgot the compost really. But the compost could be here, or it's swapped with the biogas. The biogas station needs to be somewhere where it's close to the livestock. So the livestock is on the far end here, and biogas obviously should be close to that, so we can actually use that. But then here it might be too far away from the buildings, although it needs a safety distance, of course. But maybe we swap this here, and biogas comes here, and compost goes here or here, and maybe we have a second compost area which is linked to the kitchen garden. We forgot one space. We actually forgot the space, which is we need some plant nursery, and that could be either we take an area which is around the water, and that becomes our plant nursery, and it's in the middle, and it goes, and the plants go then everywhere. That could be one way, or it's somewhere else centralized space where we can have that. Maybe instead of the storage, maybe this becomes the plant nursery, and our storage is on the other side. And then we have these dark green areas. I can imagine that these are buffer plants with trees, fruit trees, avocados. I still haven't looked at a species which could be planted here, but I can imagine that this should be along the perimeter of the space. It also kind of marks the area. It helps from wind mitigation and so on. And now we can and this is just another layer, and then we can refine it again. So now we have another layer of thinking. Normally what I do then is I go on top of it and I draw another option. But I'm very happy with this, and I will try to move forward with that and try to extract either a layout or even some rules on what should happen. For example, that the kitchen need to be next to the kitchen garden, or that the arrival need to next to the street, but then you have the office, and maybe you have a storage next to it, or and for example, the children's playground needs to be protected in the background. Kitchen next to the kitchen garden, as I said. The nursery somewhere central, and also the storage for equipment somewhere central, and so on. So this overall thinking is really done. You need to do it on a paper, but it's extremely useful. And that's, of course, the answer to the question before. It's extremely useful to think have this direct connection between your brain and your pen. So I will just draw over it. Maybe we can even extract some layout out of this. By the way, I mean, yes, it's a bubble diagram, but it's also inspired by this one. So I'm not going to be the architect, but I am very intrigued by this kind of arrangement, and it could be nice to adapt some of this even in the architecture. I know there will be very little budget, but let's see. Maybe it works. And I like this circular arrangement because what it means that every bit can be connected with the other one. If you do a row house, the problem is with a row house is that it's going to be like this. So you have an entrance, and yeah, you can maybe connect in between, but then you have another one here. With this circular arrangements, you have the chance to connect to more than one space next to you. Anyway, I mean, of course, there are different ways to look at it, but I like the idea that we give that space some identity, which refers back to the history, but also gives a new view on it. All right, I will try to sketch over, and maybe we get to some kind of nice layout. All right, I think that's it. I'm pretty happy with this, and I can continue with my ladybug. Well, first I need to, of course, model this. So the next step is to model this. Of course, I got way further than just a bubble diagram, but I just want to give you an idea on how important it is to actually think about what you want to design. And sometimes if you have too much freedom, actually you don't go anywhere, and you will just struggle to find a direction. And in this way, you give yourself some rules, and you get to a conclusion much faster. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with this as a first kind of sketch concept. And yeah, in the next video, I will probably model this in 3D, and we'll see where we get to. Oh wow! All right. I hope you liked this video. Subscribe. Maybe become a member if you want. If you want to support my channel, you're always welcome. And yeah, see you in the next video.